In Major League Baseball, the Cubs and the Diamondbacks were fit to be tied. The Cubs had an interesting finish to their series finale against the Rattlesnakes down in the desert. On the south side, the tarp was too fit to be covered, while the Angels covered the White Sox, scoring the fewest runs in the three-game opening series. In basketball, the Bulls' comeback attempt failed against the Dallas Mavericks, but are still in a good position to make the playoffs. Playoffs? In college basketball, the men's NCAA tournament is set with their Final Four, while the women's Final Four is starting to take shape as well. That and our very special guest and a whole lot more in this Monday extravaganza of the program on Second City Sports starts right now. Welcome to this Monday extravaganza of Second City Sports, the last one for the month of March. You're locked and loaded, and you're live and in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago, along with Mr. King McGee, which is she. I am Sidney Brown. You know that it's me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at CK80. Once again, it's CK80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can find my King McGee on the Twitter, Executors McGee, and IG.
Make sure you download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and YouTube. Please subscribe to our podcast. We are located at War Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We are on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. And while you're at it, please give War Media a follow at WARR Media on all social media platforms. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
We are unapologetically fun, and we have very definite opinions. If you have any definite opinion due to our extravaganza we call a Sports Talk Radio show, excuse me, you can definitely hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or Sports Zone Chicago YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comment section. LaKeena will get them up on the screen for you. But if you decide to troll, indoor, do something silly, dumb, or stupid, I'll give LaKeena full powers to give you dumbos to build and be a boot.
Toodles.
But before we begin, shout out to the replay game that's catching us on the replay right now on Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube pages. And shout out to the live game that's checking us out right now on all our social media platforms. And don't you ever forget our motto where we're talking about sports, music, entertainment, and more, minus politics. We will always provide.
It will remind you with some of the best here on Second City Sports. Our good friend, sports radio veteran, Julie Swieca Gannon will join us to talk about the latest hot topics. And yes, and she'll talk. She's back with us to talk about the latest hot topics in local sports and nationally. The Final Four on the men's side is now set for San Antonio, and a repeat of what happened some years back in San Antonio. We'll talk about that. The women's Final Four is starting to take shape. And it looks like Aaron Rodgers might be leaning towards retirement. We'll talk about that. But first, the first full weekend of baseball is in the books. And we'll start with the Cubs. And the Cubs lose a tough one. They split their series against the Diamondbacks. And unfortunately, if you saw yesterday's game, it kind of was indicative of how it's been last year. They went up early. Unfortunately, the D-backs rallied, thanks to the Cubs bullpen, 8 runs in the 8th, and they came back to split the series. Even though Kyle Tucker did his first home run as a Cub, so that's a plus, and and everything else. But unfortunately, the bullpen again is what kind of was the Cubs undoing, like it was in game 2 of that series.
How ironic how the Cubs Diamondback series shaped out to be. LaKeena, last Saturday night, they held on. I'm talking about the Cubs for a 4-3 win. Shout out Dasby Swanson for nailing down that runner off of second base, got him caught between third and home. And we talked about the defense around this time last year being shaky, but it improved as the year went on. But yesterday, and we were talking about this before we went on live, that I was watching that Cubs game. I watched a good chunk of it because the Sox game was in a rain delay. We'll get to the Sox in a moment. But after Kyle Tucker blasted that 3-run home run in the eighth inning, his second of the year, I said game over. So I turned to March Madness and I was watching something else too. And then after the Michigan State Auburn game, I checked my phone and said the Cubs lost. I was like, how the hell did that happen? I was like, oh yeah, that bullpen. Now, if you're a Cubs fan, should you be concerned after 5 games? Yes. Is it time to jump off the bridge? No. I figure as much as this. I think after the first month, I think I know the quarter of the season is Memorial Day in May, but for this Cubs team, if this continues to go on through the end of April and you still sitting around 500 or a couple of games below 500, I'm not saying it's time to fire Jed Hoyer or get rid of Craig Counsell, but you have to take a good, strong side eye look at your team. And I know Jed Hoyer did his best, according to him, to try to build this team to a division-winning contender. But I'm not saying jump off the bridge just yet. But if those guys in the bullpen cannot do their job, it's going to be another long year. And with Jed Hoyer's neck on the line, you cannot afford to give some of those veteran players long ropes, if you know what I mean.
Suzuki, Seiya had a nice series. Like I said, Kyle Tucker had a home run and three RBIs. Dansby Watson, both had a hit, and of course, a great defensive play in that Saturday game. So I'm just like, you kind of wasted all that. And unfortunately, if you're the Cubs, I mean, it's sort of one of those things. You're just like, why? It's kind of crazy, but they did leave 8 guys on base, so that you probably think that, okay, yeah, the bullpen did F up like they did last year, but
Mhm.
Unfortunately, you got to think that the Cubs probably could have padded that lead, and maybe there would have been a little bit more confidence in that Cubs bullpen. But but I digress. I mean, Morgan, who got the loss. I mean, he's been unfortunately he gave up 6 runs, and maybe you probably have to put him send him down for a bit to kind of get his confidence back.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, the Cubs, you kind of wasted a shot to get to 500, and you're going to be going to San Francisco to play the Athletics. That's what they're going by for right now. And you kind of like you gotta win the series at the very least. So just
Mhm.
to kind of make sure you got to get good confidence boost, especially for that bullpen. So we'll see.
Yes, I told you on this show on Friday, and I said this before we went on live. That Cubs offense is going to be fun to watch. I know they disappeared at the early May last year, and they weren't able to fully recover. But if this offense is going to play like this, you're going to have. I know their starting pitcher carried them the last couple years, but if you can get at least 75% of what you've been getting as far as your starting pitching over the last couple of years, I think you'll be in good shape. But that bullpen has to turn it around and turn around in a hurry. I'm not saying panic just yet, but you definitely got to be concerned. And I want to give this player some props. P. Cole Armstrong. I said that he was the fastest guy on the team. He was starting to come on offensively toward the end of last year. It looks like he's been putting it all together. You saw that in this series against the Diamondbacks. His defense was excellent. He's smart and very fast around the base paths, and his bat is not too shabby either.
Yeah, he's actually looked really good so far, and he had a really great series against the D-bats. So hopefully he can keep it going with the with the new hair color and all. Going to the South Side. Is that game still going on? Well, actually, they're about to play the Twins in about like 45 minutes from
Why
now.
on a Monday afternoon? Why? And it's 42 degrees out. Why?
Well, that's just one, and then of course, yesterday's rubber match, there was a long delay for like almost 2 hours. They had to, if you saw like the replays of it, the grounds crew, someone got caught, and of course the rain got drenched, and they had to resod the field. It took like almost 2 hours for it to set. So, of course, Kyron Williams hit a solo home run after not too long after that break, and of course, the Angels ended up winning the series 3-2. And look, it was unfortunate because the Sox actually were competitive in that series,
Mhm.
but again, it was the little things that they just couldn't get it going.
Besides that one error yesterday and almost another error in Saturday's game, the White Sox defense was excellent. And as we talked about before the season started, that this season was going to be about the development of some of the young players that are supposed to be part of this core going forward, and about the fundamentals of the game. Uh, Hitting the ball, pitching the ball, and catching the ball. The White Sox did two of those three things. The starting pitcher was excellent. Davis Martin got roped up in the first inning yesterday, but I thought he settled down. Same thing with Jonathan Kent, even though he didn't give up any runs. The White Sox starting pitching was excellent. The bullpen wasn't too shabby either. I know they got touched a little bit yesterday after the rain delay, but you cannot blame the White Sox struggles, at least these last two games, on the starting pitching. It's really the lack of offense, unfortunately, that this is where we're going to see until some of those young guys start to come up. I think Cal Tills should be up by the end of April, early May, but I digress. But outside that offensive outburst of open day, LaKeena, you only scored 3 runs. That's including that shutout last Saturday, which I was at. But I will say this: unlike last year, where you got shut out 1-0 at home against the Tigers, this is a little bit different. At least with this group, LaKeena, this group is trying. You don't see them hanging their heads down or going through the motions or just being passe. This young team, they want to prove something. They got something to prove, and even though there's not going to be a lot of wins, even though we said they're not going to be as bad as last year, but you start to see the signs of Will Venable, his philosophy early in these young guys. Is this going to be the final roster at the end of the year? Absolutely not. But you start to see signs of the foundation of this team very early. It just so happens that the Angels took advantage of a couple breaks here and there. They're not that great of a team either, but they took advantage of a couple of breaks. They only scored 5 runs in a 3-game series to beat the Sox, and the Sox scored 10. Of course, 8 of them came on opening day, so we'll go figure with that.
Well, look, if you're the White Sox, I think you'll take 60 to 65. If you can get 60 to 65, I think that you'll take that if you're a Sox fan. Now, on the flip side, though, for the Yankees, as we go through the rest of baseball real quick before we go to break, I know we're up against it, but the Yankees score about 50 home runs in their series against Milwaukee. 12-3, well, 20-9 on Saturday, and of course yesterday was 12-3. Aaron Judge so far has been hitting the ball like crazy, and it's not just him, but he's getting contributions from other people too.
Yeah, Chaz Chisholm, Cody Bellinger, Paul Goldschmidt from St. Louis. Yeah, the Bronx Bombers from 1927 reappears here in 2025. The Yankees in total hit 15 home runs for the series. Welcome back, Nestor Cortez. He was that starting pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers in that game on Saturday. First 3 pitches, 3 home runs. Not good. And Aaron Judge becomes the first Yankees player in franchise history to have 4 home runs in his first 3 games. Remember this time last year, with his early season struggles, everybody wanted him thrown under the New York City Bridge. Not so far through the first 3 games this year. It looks like he's in mid-season form already.
San Diego's 4-0 for the first time since 1984, and they had a nice series there. Of course, the Dodgers, they're 5-0 right now. Phillies lose a tough one yesterday, but it did win 2 out of 3 in DC against the Nationals, so not a bad start. I mean, I think the Marlins swept Pittsburgh, so they're off to I don't know if they're going to keep up with it, but they're off to a decent start. Atlanta's over, of course. Like I said, they got swept by San Diego, so they don't want to read too much into some of these results, but at least in early form, very early, I should say. But should be interesting to see what happens in these next few weeks in the season.
Yeah, and your Seattle Mariners split their 4-game series against as we'll call them on this show, the Oakland Athletics of Sacramento. We talked about this last year, LaKeena. We talked about it a little bit during spring training, but Brent Rooker, Shane Langerhans, and Mason Miller, their closer. I like some of the young talent for Oakland. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to surprise people and make the playoffs, but I think they'll take another step up this year. So Seattle, I know they got Randy Rosarena. They picked him up via the trade deadline deal last year. They got to get some consistent offense. They always have the pitcher, but if they could get any consistent offense, I think that team could be dangerous. And Texas Rangers, they won their series against Boston over the weekend. It was nice to see Jacob deGrom yesterday back on the mound. I know he got his World Series ring a couple years ago, even though that was the year he got hurt, but it was nice back to see him on the mound yesterday. If Texas can stay healthy, I think that team could be dangerous, just like they were 2 years ago.
All right, go into this week's series. You got Kansas City and Milwaukee. Of course, we said the White Sox, they start their series hosting Minnesota starting in about 45 minutes from now. Boston and Baltimore. Baltimore had a kind of a rough start to their season, but hopefully they can get it going there against Boston. Colorado and Philadelphia. The Marlins, we'll see how they do against the Mets. I know the Mets want to kind of get back on track here. Texas, speaking of Texas, they face Cincinnati in Cincy, and Pittsburgh goes down to Florida to play Tampa.
In the rest of your schedule for today, it looks like this: the Washington Nationals play the Blue Jays. The former interleague series of the Canadian teams way back when. The Angels, they took 2 out of 3 in Chicago. They'll play the St. Louis Cardinals, who swept the Minnesota Twins over the weekend. I think that's the team that's going to have a major drop in Minnesota. Me and Christine, and of course, LaKeena will make our official baseball picks coming up on Friday, but none of these games will have nothing to do with our picks. San Francisco will face Houston. Cleveland will face San Diego. The Tigers will travel to Seattle to take on LaKeena's Mariners. The Cubs and Athletics, as you just mentioned, will start their 3-game series tonight. And the Braves will take on the Dodgers tonight. And your Tuesday night game on TBS will be the Arizona Diamondbacks and the New York Yankees. That's tomorrow night at 6:05 p.m. Central Standard Time on TBS. And LaKeena, just one quick note before we break. It's going to be an emotional home opener for the Brewers. Of course, this will be the first home opener in a long time with the deceased broadcaster Bob Uecker. I know they're going to give a strong and emotional tribute right before today's game.
Yeah, Yankee Stadium did a nice solid there in that opener. Unfortunately, they of course the Brewers got swept and just got their butts kicked. But hopefully a little home cooking will give them just exactly what they need, a little bit of a boost.
Yes. Speaking of another boost, on the flip side, we had to talk about the Bulls in the NBA. Last night was fight night in a couple of games, and we had another serious injury that could shake out the playoff picture entirely. And what will the Bulls need to do to go forward to perhaps improve their playoff spot? We'll discuss that and a whole lot more as you're listening to Second City Sports, the Monday Extravaganza. I'm Sid. That's LaKeena. This is Sports Zone Chicago.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too. These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver.
I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov, a public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Welcome back to this Monday extravaganza edition of Second City Sports, the last one from the month of March. You're locked and loaded, and we're live in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid. That's LaKeena. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow McGee again on the Twitter, X, again on IG.
If you have any questions or comments for us as we talk Bulls, NBA, and perhaps March Madness time permitting for this segment, you can definitely hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comments section. LaKeena will get the up on the screen for you.
Off to the NBA we go here as the Bulls lose a tough one to Dallas. They hung in there with Dallas for most of the game, but unfortunately couldn't get couldn't pull off that magic like they did a couple of days ago against the Lakers. But a nice effort there. Brazil has had 28 points. Just too much Klay Thompson for the Mavs there as they got a much needed win, just edging out the Bulls. But even still, the Bulls still have a shot perhaps getting that 8th seed. After what some of the stuff that happened over the weekend, but yeah, so but even still, I mean, look, we'll see. I mean, look, well, we talked about it. They play OKC tonight. That's going to be a tough task for them, especially the way OKC's been playing lately. Especially, well, they're coming off a back-to-back, so that might. They beat Indiana on Saturday, but I'm talking about the Thunder. But it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I think the Bulls kind of got knocked back to earth a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into tonight's game in just a moment. But going back to Saturday's game, LaKeena, the Bulls actually shot well from the field, 42% from three, 47% overall. But it was that slow start to the first half, which got them down in trouble. Now, as we talked about on the shows last week, this Bulls group, they do not quit. They give full effort. You had to give part of that credit to head coach Billy Donovan, and you saw it there last Saturday, but they just didn't have enough. On the flip side for Dallas, you mentioned with Klay Thompson, he had a big game with 20 points, but Anthony Davis, we didn't know he was going to play on that, but he was back in his hometown, Chicago. He played well, 18.7 rebounds. Najee Marshall, who's been a very important role player for the Dallas Mavericks all year, 14.7 rebounds. P.J. Washington, 19 points and also 7 rebounds. And Spencer Dinwiddie, a one-time former Bull, he had 14 points and 11 assists, including 2 for 4 shooting from downtown. So Dallas got contributions all in up and down their lineup. They used their hot start early. For the Bull, on the flip side, for the Chicago Bulls, we talked about it's all about the young guys' development at this point. Matas Buzelis had another big game with 28 points and 9 rebounds. Of course, Kobe White continues his hot play, 25 points and 11 rebounds. And, of course, Kevin Huerter, he took a step back, but he still had 8 important points. Zach Collins, 13 points and 7 rebounds coming off the bench.
And, I mean, look, nice effort there for the Bulls against Dallas, but I think Dallas really wanted this game kind of like that. I guess there were some people that said, maybe they should tank, especially after AD's injury, but we'll talk about another injury that might, help make that decision for him in a second here. But going into this game coming up tonight, I know Giddey, there was some rumors that he may not play, but it was like he is going to play. It looks like he's good to go, so will be facing his former team. That matchup between him and SGA, that should be a fun matchup to say the least. So it'll be interesting to see how if the Bulls can keep up with OKC.
Yeah, like you said, LaKeena, I think the Bulls can. Excuse me. I think the Bulls can catch OKC off guard. I know OKC has everything wrapped up with the best. Cleveland has the best record lead, but OKC has the best record in the rest of the conference. This game really doesn't mean anything to them, long as they can stay healthy. Going to the playoffs, the Thunder will be okay. But I think the Bulls, if they can come out with a hot start, unlike Saturday night's loss against the Mavericks, I think they can hang in there. But You mentioned you got that bad man SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, your top candidate for MVP on the other side. Don't forget about Chet Holmgren. Don't forget about my guy Jalen Williams, the one that wears number 8. He's their third scoring option on that team as well. And don't forget about Alex Caruso. I don't know if he's going to play tonight or not, but OKC is deep. And Isaiah Hartenstein, who they picked up from the Knicks via free agency last summer, he's starting to play well. So OKC's lineup ecstatic. You mentioned about the amount of games they played over the last couple of weeks. The Bulls can catch them off guard if they get up to a hot start tonight.
Oh, going to be very interesting with that matchup coming up tonight. Now, going to the rest of the NBA, Houston and Phoenix. Houston, no trouble with Phoenix, 148-109.
Just yesterday, spoke.
Yeah. So, but unfortunately, the big story from that game last night is unfortunately KD. He twisted his ankle, and there's no word yet. There hasn't been any updates on the ankle injury, but you only got 6 games left. You're about a game and a half back for the last that 10 spot. If you're OKC, if you're Phoenix, of course Sacramento's ahead of you. What do you do? Do you just sit KD out for the year? Do you try to maybe see if it's not too serious, see if you can go for these last 6 games? What do you do if you're Phoenix?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, and I wish I had the answer. I'm just searching, just like you and them and everybody else. But if it's not too serious, you will play him. But I don't want to say the stick of fourth in Phoenix, but I think I said this over a month ago. But if the ankle injury is real serious, you can't risk that man's future. So, excuse me. So, if it's more serious than we think, obviously he's going to be done for the year. The bad news, another bad news is for the Suns team that we mentioned about Dallas. They had a big win at Chicago last Saturday night. The Sacramento Kings, there's something brewing in that locker room. Does that sound familiar with those players that are over there now? They were here. We'll get to that in a moment. But Sacramento's been struggling. Dallas is starting to come on again. So this is there's no good time for injuries, but this is a bad timing once again for another KD injury.
Sticking with last night's games, you had Toronto and Philadelphia. Toronto trouble Philadelphia. Brandon Podziemski had 27 points, a career high, as the Warriors beat the Spurs. New Orleans edged out the Hornets. And apparently it was fight night in the Twin Cities as Minnesota beat Detroit. But there's more to this because there's a little bit of a brouhaha, I guess, down there up in the Twin Cities. And I guess, 5 players. And I know J.B. Bickerstaff got ejected. I forgot this is a coach from Minnesota who got ejected. But yeah, let's just say it was a very, it got a little tense, there in that game. But it had been brewing.
Tense?
Things have been brewing all game long. If you watched the entire game, but yeah, it was a pretty bad. I think DiVincenzo got into it with Isaiah Stewart, and I think it just got. It got a little heated. I don't want to say a little heated, but it got very it was just really crazy. And they got into the crowd, and they just got all. There were no punches thrown. There may have been a couple of little slight punches thrown, but yeah, the crowd. Thanks to good thing for the T-Wolves fans, they didn't get into it. They just kind of try to stay as far away from it as possible. There was a lot of security there, but yeah, it was a little tense.
Yeah, you definitely do not want another malice out at the Palace. And that was still an ugly incident that happened almost now 21 years ago. But as we talked about with the Pistons team all year long, they're a young, scrappy, enthusiastic bunch. You mentioned about Isaiah Stewart. We've been talking about him all year. Remember, he got punked by LeBron James a couple years ago, and that was his claim to fame. But, he leads that bunch. Now he got in the middle of that scuffle last night. So hopefully we'll see what NBA Commissioner Adam Silver does in terms of potential fines and suspensions on that. But the Detroit Pistons have been struggling lately. I know they're trying to get back into it. They're in a fight for their lives for that 4th, 5th spot. They're battling Indiana. They're battling Milwaukee to have a possible home court advantage for that first round series. So that Detroit team is fun to watch. But I saw a couple of funny memes and tweets last night, including from Jeff Agres, the sports deputy editor over there at the Sun-Times. It's nice. I'm just paraphrasing. It's nice. The Pistons are back fighting against something to that effect. Yeah. It almost takes you back to the late 80s, early 90s with that old bad boy squad. This version of the Pistons is nowhere near that. But after that scuffle last night, people want to compare this team to that bad boy team. Totally two different scenarios.
Well, and plus the Mavs. Some people are compared to the Mavs of the past, but let's remember too. I mean, it started with someone throwing a cup at on the court. That this whole thing, this here kind of like just started. It been like been a little bit intense. There was some rough fouls through most of the game, and things just got like like even more tense. So this is kind of started with all that. But yeah, we just see what fines and suspensions are sorted once all this is sorted out. But we'll see.
Yep, the Milwaukee Bucks lose to the Atlanta Hawks at home last night, 145 to 124. We talked about Damian Lillard being out with those blood clots. Hopefully, he'll return healthy in just in time for the playoffs because the Bucks need him and they need him badly. We know that Giannis is one of the best premier big men in the game, but with his health concerns, if he goes down, it's going to get ugly real fast. Atlanta, they still somehow, some way, LaKeena, they hanging on to that 8th seed, holding on Chicago. You have Trey Young. You still have DeAndre Hunter on that squad, Clint Capella. But that team just somehow, some way wins ball games. They're not a bad team. They're not a great team. They're just above average team at best.
They got about 8 or like 7 or 8 games left. So we'll see what kind of how all this sort of shakes out. To finish it up, the Knicks no trouble with Portland. And the Cleveland held off the Clippers. Nice effort by the Clippers there. They actually were down big, but they made it interesting. But Jared Allen and Spider, Donovan Mitchell sort of shut the door on that one, finishing up that one. Real quickly with Saturday's games, Boston pulled away from San Antonio. OKC, we talked about that earlier. They beat Indiana. The Lakers got a much-needed win down there in Memphis. Miami beat Philadelphia. Brooklyn edged out the Wizards in the Tank Bowl. And Orlando, Sacramento got their butts kicked by Orlando. And things are getting kind of crazy over there in Sacktown.
Yeah, they're talking about chemistry issues in the locker room. Didn't we hear that before here in Chicago? Zach LaVine in particular? Same scenario, different team. I'm just saying we'll leave that alone. Now, this was Friday's results. The Nuggets blew out the Utah Jazz. The Warriors got a big win at New Orleans against the Pelicans. That win also for Golden State without Steph Curry. He should be returning back to the lineup soon. Timberwolves blew out the Suns. The Knicks beat the Bucks by 9. The Raptors and Hornets in the Toilet Tank Bowl. They win that one by 11. The Clippers beat the Nets, and the Pistons got by the Cavaliers. And that was your results from Friday.
Going to the games for this week, you got tonight, you got Utah and Charlotte at 6. You got Sacramento, speaking of, against Indiana. The Clippers continue their East Coast trip at Orlando. Miami, congrats to our goalist, Alana Tucker. She just got married over the weekend, so congrats to her and her new hubby. Boston and Memphis, that'll start off a special Monday doubleheader here on TNT, True TV, and streaming on Max. Of course, we talk about the Bulls, no KC. Dallas hosts Brooklyn, and Houston the Lakers as they the second game of that special Monday night doubleheader on TNT, True TV, and streaming on Max.
Yeah, big game for both teams here, but I think it's bigger for the Lakers if they want to get home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. Going to tomorrow's action Tuesday, Portland, they blew one at MSG last night against the Knicks. The Knicks did not have Jalen Brunson that one. Portland will continue the East Coast road trip. They'll take on the Atlanta Hawks. The New York Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers will do battle. That's at 6:30. The Suns and the Bucks will do battle. That's the first game in the TNT Tuesday night doubleheader without Kevin Durant for that one. And without Damian Lillard. So TNT, they might have to have last man standing comedy night doing this broadcast, but we'll see what happens with that. Finish out the rest of the Tuesday schedule. Looks like this. Orlando visits San Antonio. The Raptors and the Bulls will do battle at the UC. This should be an easy win for the Bulls, even though they're coming off a back-to-back at OKC tonight. The Wizards will not the Wizards. The Warriors will visit the Memphis Grizzlies. A big battle there. They'll be the Grizzlies' third game with their new head coach. And wrapping up the Tuesday night doubleheader on TNT, the Minnesota Timberwolves will take on the Denver Nuggets in a rematch of last year's second round playoff matchup.
And we know Minnesota got him the last time a couple of weeks ago, so we'll see if Jokic, Murray, and the gang can get their revenge. Wednesday's matchups, you got first game of the ESPN Wednesday doubleheader as it makes its return. The Knicks and Cleveland. This could be a potential first, a potential playoff series preview. We'll see what happens there at 6 on ESPN. You got Charlotte, Indiana, Sacramento, and Washington, Miami and Boston, Utah and Houston, Atlanta and Dallas. That should be interesting. San Antonio and Denver. The second game of the ESPN Wednesday doubleheader, you got Detroit and OKC. That should be a fun. We'll see, if there's going to be suspensions from that game. From that game against Minnesota yesterday. And the Clippers are back home as they host the Pelicans.
Your schedule for Thursday looks like this. Orlando will take on Washington in our nation's capital. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers will do battle from the city of brotherly love. At 6:30 Chicago time, we'll have the Brooklyn Nets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. The first game in that TNT Thursday night doubleheader will feature the Memphis Grizzlies and the Miami Heat. Miami trying to hang on to a play-in/playoff spot in the East. Portland will visit Toronto. And the second game on that Thursday night TNT doubleheader will feature the Golden State Warriors. Hopefully, Steph Curry will be back for this one against LeBron James, Luka Doncic, and the Golden State Warriors. And that's your schedule for Thursday for the NBA for this upcoming week.
I'm sure TNT is hoping that he'll be able to play in that game because there's always those two teams, especially. So we'll see what happens there. This is Second City Sports. I'm Sports LaKeena, McGee, Sidney Brown with you. We got just enough time before our girl Julie Swieca Gannon joins us for the rest of the show. The Final Four is now set on the men's side. It just only the second time in the tournament history, all 4 number 1 seeds. We'll be going. Of course, the last time that happened, I'll give Sid a quiz. When's the last time that happened, Sid? All number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four.
I know this answer, and I'm not on Google. 2008. You had Kansas, Memphis. Who else you had in there? Yeah, Kansas, Memphis. I know they did bet on the championship game. UCLA with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Love. Let's see, who's the other one? Can I ask for a lifeline? Which conference did this team come from?
ACC. Big ACC.
ACC. Duke?
Close. No, it was North Carolina with Tyler Hansbrough.
Okay.
They won, because they won the
next year.
I
know they won the next year. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they won the next year.
I got 3 out of 4 right.
And the irony is that it was also in San Antonio, believe it or not. So, there's talk about your irony there. But all 4 number 1 seeds, it was all chalk. Florida came back and beat Texas Tech. Auburn held off Michigan State. Of course, Michigan State, their shooting was just abysmal. Houston, they had no trouble in their regional final against Tennessee. And Duke, for the most part, didn't have no trouble against Alabama in the East. So, that's your Final Four. And I'm seeing some people complain about, like, it's shock. It's boring. Oh, come on, guys. Look, we had Final Fours where you had FAU and San Diego State. A lot of people did not watch that Final Four, folks. Just saying. So, look. It's kind of look. I mean, you've got your stars. You've got Walter Clayton Jr. and that Florida making their first trip since 14. You got Auburn making their second trip. It's been a long time since they've been there. Of course, Johnny Brom, of course, that elbow, and they're banged up. So we'll see if that becomes a problem there. Houston making their first trip back since all the way back in '84 when Hakeem Olajuwon was on that squad. That was Georgetown that year.
Didn't they make it there in 2021?
You know what? Yeah, I think they did. I don't think they did. I'll check it out, but I don't think they did. But yeah, Duke going back for the first time in a couple of years. They were just there like a couple of years ago. That was when Coach K retired. But Josh Shire makes his first trip to the Final Four. Of course, he's the you kind of one hand. Of course, he's been there as a player. Of course, they won in 13. Of course, he won as back in 2010. I'm sorry. Then of course, as a assistant coach, of course that game against Wisconsin, of course, now he's going back as a head coach.
Yeah, I want to get into. I'm sure Real Parky can continue this on the other side with Julie Swieca coming up next hour. But I want to go back to that Duke Alabama contest. I think that was the most exciting. That was the most exciting game on Saturday, in my opinion. Duke really shut down Alabama on the inside, especially in that first half. Cooper Flag looked great. You definitely could tell that that the ankle injury is not really bothering him. We talked about Duke's depth all year with Kanopo and Tyrese Proctor at the point guard position. They really stepped up yesterday. Alabama couldn't really get it going in that second half. They self-destructed, but not just with the lack of shooting, but they really turned the ball over in the late stages of the game. But they hung with them in that first half with Duke. My guy Mark Sears led that charge for Alabama, but we told you that they're very athletic. They like to score, but defensively they're okay, but they not anything to write home about. So Duke took advantage of that. They out-rebounded the Crimson Tide, and they deserved the trip to the Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was going to be hard for Alabama to top that shooting performance they had, against BYU. But yeah, the Duke's defense really didn't, kind of let them do anything. And so, they're not a big surprise that I think the score is more shocking for folks. I mean, they did make it interesting in late, but again, it was just, too much Cooper Flag, Tyrese Proctor, and the rest of that group. So, a nice showing and a great performance there. A good team performance. Knuppel had a couple of big shots as well. So it's definitely one of those days where you're just like, well, so yeah, it's going to be interesting there as well.
Yeah, in the Texas Tech Florida contest, Florida, you mentioned they struggled early, but as we talked about during this tournament on this show, they're a well-balanced team. They can shoot it from the outside. They can kill you inside the paint, and they're a very good sneaky defensive team. You mentioned with all their role players too. It starts with their superstar Walter Clayton. You mentioned he really had a big performance, and you need them to stand out when it counted the most. And also too, you still have Alex Condon, who potential NBA prospect too, and you still have Hall. No, not David Hall, but you had Hall, Florida's Hall, who came off the bench and scored 20 points, which was big for the Gators. So, and the Gators shot the ball well enough to win and to survive at the end. They shot it at a 43% clip overall, 37.5% from three. As we mentioned, they locked it down defensively, made some big shots when they had to, and they'll go to the Final Four for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, it's been like about a little over a decade since they've been there. So in 2014. So yeah, I mean, look, they literally had this, look, Texas Tech. I mean, once JT Toppin missed that they missed their free throws. Gotta make your free throws, folks. And that kind of did them in there. Of course, Clayton started that rally, 18-4 run that last 5 minutes of that game. So Florida was able to pull it out there. Now, Houston, if you guys saw after the game, Houston, Mr. Jim Nance, one of the more famous Houston grads, was there to take a picture with Kelvin Sampson, said that he's with us. So that was actually pretty funny there how that transpired. But I think Houston and Duke will probably be like one of they just didn't let Tennessee do anything. I mean, Tennessee, to their credit, they got it down to 10. But unfortunately, they hit a couple of big threes. They just slammed the door there, and they did make the Final Four in the 21. I forgot about that Final Four because it was a bubble Final Four. Of course, you guys remember Gonzaga and UCLA. Of course, let's hit that memorable 3-pointer that But unfortunately, Baylor beat Houston pretty good there in the nationals. So that's why I forgot about that because that game wasn't very contested. But I mean, look, Emmanuel Sharp, was the man there. Also LJ Cryer as well. And Houston, that defense, suffocated it would be one way to put it. And that's just they couldn't get anything going. They were 5 for 29. Tennessee was from 3-point range. That's how bad it was, and it was just not a good. They picked the wrong time to have their worst shooting night of the day of the season.
I think at one stretch late in that first half, I think they made 5 field goals overall. I'm talking about the Volunteers. They really couldn't set their tempo. They like to get up and down. They can shoot the ball very well, but the perimeter defense from the Houston Cougars was excellent. They dominated the paint, and Houston, even though they started off shooting well, they kind of had a lackadaisical approach to start that second half. But as you mentioned, Tennessee started to pick up that press defense, got it down to 10. But Tennessee started to miss some free throws too. So Houston picked up on that. They made about 2 or 3 3-point shots with under 5 minutes to go. In Houston, we talked about them being one of the top 5 teams in the country all year long. They get by Tennessee in dominating fashion, and they also head to the Final Four now.
Meanwhile, Auburn and Auburn, it was kind of the same thing here. I mean, Michigan State, they did make a run. Michigan State did, but it was too little, too late. It was just one of those things where if you're Auburn, Yanni Braun, he got hurt his elbow pretty bad. He kind of. And also, people want to compare it to the Willis Reed, moment. It kind of was. I mean, he came out and he hit a 3-pointer. After he came back, you saw his parents were out there. His dad, was a little concerned. His mom was cheering on, and it was just one of those days where it was really great to see. But yeah, I mean, they really didn't have to do too much. I'm talking about Auburn did, and but only 7 for 23 for 3-point range for Michigan State. They just couldn't get into a rhythm. Just we thought that they did, but. Things just kind of like went haywire for Michigan State. They just couldn't get into a rhythm, and Auburn was able to slam the door pretty quick.
Yeah, my guy Jace Richardson struggled. The son of Jason Richardson, the former NBA player from a couple of decades ago. He only had 11 points on 4 13 shooting. On the flip side for Auburn, as you mentioned about the Spartans 3-point shooting, Auburn's 3-point shooting wasn't great either, shooting it at a 30% clip, but they really didn't need that 3-point shot. They shot the ball decently over 43%, but you mentioned about your superstars have to come up big in big moments. What about Pettiford, 10 points, 3 rebounds coming off the bench? He was the only guy that really did something for Auburn coming off that bench. Of course, I like my guy Denver Jones. He only had 8 points yesterday, only 1 assist. That's not going to get it done. I think he needs to do better as they face Florida next Saturday night in the national semifinal game. But you mentioned about the superstars stepping up big, and you need to have 1 or 2 role players to help fill in as well. And that's what happened with Auburn yesterday. So Bruce Pearl, he's the poor man's John Calipari in my book. We won't get into it here since we run it up against the break. But he finally gets after the embarrassing loss in the first round of the tournament last year against Yale. They go back to the Final Four.
Yeah, second time in 6 years, I should say. They went to the Final Four. They went in 2019. That was Bruce Pearl's first year at the helm at Auburn. So, it should be. Look, we'll get more into the Final Four, men's Final Four coming up on Friday. But yeah, a couple of great matchups coming up on Saturday, and of course they'll both be on CBS. So don't worry, folks. You don't have to go on TBS. It'll be on CBS. Of course, Florida and Auburn. Of course, Florida won their loan, meaning that was I think that was around like last month. But we'll see. I mean, Auburn, I'm a little worried about their depth. I mean, they're a little banged up, so we'll see what happens there. But should be a good one. And Houston and Duke. I mean, that's going to be the main course, if you will, and that should be a fun one. Defense, Cooper Flagg and LJ Cryer. That should be a fun matchup in that second semifinal.
Yeah, turn your mic on, Sid. Can Houston's depth match Max Duke's depth? And you mentioned about defense too. I think there's going to be, we'll get down to the nitty gritty of these 2 games on Friday, but that's going to be my 2 early factors as we head into Saturday.
Couple of good ones here. We'll talk about the women's. Final Four as it's starting to take shape a little bit coming. We'll probably do it after the break too. After we're with our girl Julie Swieca Gannon, sports media legend, and here in Chicago. We'll talk Bears, Bulls, her Cubs, and Northwestern. A new contract for Mr. Chris Collins for the men's basketball team. We'll talk about it and a whole lot more coming next. LaKeena, McGee, Sidney Brown, Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago. Our girl Julie Swieca Gannon coming up right after this.
No, I don't know though. I'm scared. I mean, you're scared.
Do you know that you're in my lane?
No, not at all.
Are you not paying attention? Are you texting? I was just checking in with my mom. I was telling her that I thought we'd be home by 6. It's okay. There's enough time. Just pay attention. I'm not even halfway through my text. There's no way. I'm not even going to look up. My babies are in the car. You have to pay attention. It's just supposed to be a quick text. I'm so sorry.
Hi, I'm Tom Brady, the director of DODEA. September is National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. The simple act of reaching out and caring for those in our communities is something we all can do. Just being there for someone you care about can be a tremendous first step in getting them access to confidential resources and support that they need. It only takes one person and one small act and 1 minute to make a difference. Let's make a difference.
Many will hear the calling. Few will earn the title. United States Marine. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of this Monday extravaganza edition of Second City Sports. You're locked and loaded in real live and in living color right here on Sports Soul Chicago, along with Miss LaKeena McGee, which is she. I ain't City Brown. You know that's me. You can follow yours truly on Twitter, X in the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow LaKeena McGee on the Twitter, X again, IG.
If you have any questions or comments for us, especially for our next guest, you can hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments to the comment section. LaKeena will get them up on the screen for you.
All right, so while we're waiting for our buddy Julie Swieca Gannon to join us, let's talk a little women's Final Four. Of course, they're halfway set. We'll start with South Carolina from yesterday. They beat Duke in that region 2. Don't ask me why they do that, but of course they're going back for the 5th straight time. This is the 8th straight time overall under Don Staley. Of course, all their Final Four appearances. Coley Kitts had 14 points. Sania Fegan had 12, and it was just the defense for South Carolina. A big 16-8. They outscored the Lady Blue Devils to hold them off and win that game, because it was back and forth for a little bit.
Yeah, as we said, going into the tournament, you know this a little bit more than I do, but I said when South Carolina lost to UConn about over a month ago, I said this would be their last loss until at least they get to the Final Four. You mentioned it was a back and forth contest. I got a chance to see a couple of clips from that game. I know on paper it's not Don Staley's strongest team on paper, but they showed what they were made of yesterday, and that's why they're back in the Final Four. It's going to be some tougher competition. We'll talk about that down the road, but the Gamecocks definitely earned this one yesterday. Shout out to the Blue Devils that definitely gave them the game. You could argue that they should have won.
Yeah, the three-point shot or lack thereof, they only shot about 29% from three-point range. That kind of did them in. But look, I mean, Carol Lawson seems like she's finally been able to put a stamp on that program, and she's got a good recruiting class coming up. So hopefully it's just a start for Duke. We'll see. I mean, they've been knocking on the door for a little bit. previous years. So maybe they can get back into consistency. Now, real quick in the Spokane region, you got UCLA going to their first ever Final Four on the women's side. I know that's weird, but they beat LSU 72-65. This was in the Region 1 in Spokane. And it was just, Gabrielle Jaquez had 18 points. Lauren Betts had 17. And this actually, despite Key Rice only scoring 8 points, but she didn't have it going. But look, Tamia Garnier had 15 off the bench for the Bruins, Lady Bruins. So a nice all the girls step up with her, with Rice having trouble from the field.
Yeah, as the kids would say, UCLA got that lick back from losing to Kim Mulkey's team last year in the Sweet 16. So congratulations to the Lady Bruins.
All right, so real quick, I know our girl Julia is on deck. So we'll the rest of the Final Four will be will match up like this. The regional finals anyway. Region 3, of course, Regional 3 in Birmingham. You've got number 1 Texas and TCU. So they actually split their season their season series. I think TCU beat them the last time they played. So that's going to be interesting there. And also, too, the big one up in Spokane, you got USC. Of course, no Juju Watkins, but they face.
I'm mad at French Toast about that. I really am.
And of course, UConn. Of course, Paige Beckers had a career high 40 points in they win the regional semi. But look, I mean, we'll see what the Lady Trojans are made of without Juju. I mean, all their girls have stepped up in her absence. So we'll see how they do against UConn. It should be a fun matchup up in Spokane later on tonight.
Yep. And those games can be seen on ESPN starting at 6 p.m. All right, LaKeena, let's bring on one of our favorites here on Second City Sports. We had her on back last year, in October on my birthday. She joins us again. She's a Chicago sports radio legend, now / pastry chef. We like to talk all things sports and more with her. Please welcome back to the program, Miss Julie Swieca Gannon. Julie, how are you?
Hey, I'm great, guys. How are you?
Good. Trying to stay dry.
LaKeena, no lie, when Sid asked me to come on, I said I would be happy to, but my girl LaKeena is going to I right? He said, yeah, she'll be there. So it wasn't a deal breaker. Yeah. It was very important to me.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Julie. I know you're. Well, let's start with this. We'll start with the crazy stuff first. I know you're a big Cubs fan, and I know they lost a tough series, in Arizona. The bullpen again. It was just. Wait, are you freaking out about the Cubs right now?
So I like the Cubs, but I'm a bigger Sox fan. But I'm married to a diehard Cubs fan, and he was beside himself yesterday. I mean, that game seems so comfortably in hand, and I'm in this nail biter watching the Sox, and they've got a tornado like conditions coming through at the ballpark, and so he's chilling and I'm freaking out. And then when things started to unfold, I went, oh my gosh, this is what happens when Jed does not improve the bullpen in the offseason. People saw it as a problem in the offseason. They chose not to do anything. They chose not to spend money, and it bit him in the butt yesterday beyond anything I could have imagined for how bad it might have gotten.
Yeah, I told LaKeena this. We discussed this to open up the show today, and we talked about this last week. At least through the first 5 games, yes, the Cubs played the Dodgers. You played the D-backs 4 times, but it looks like this Cubs offense will be fun to watch. But if that starting pitch you can never catch up to at least what they did last year, at least close to it, I think they'll be okay. But their bullpen has to be fixed. But talk to us about that offense. I like Pete Crow, Armstrong, Dansby, Swanson. It looks like Cal Tucker's going to make a big difference, not only in the field, but with that bat like he did yesterday with that big home run.
Oh, he's been fun to watch already. And you're right. There's a lot of excitement about their hitters. I think if you could mash the Cubs hitters with the Sox pitching, you'd really have something. Like if we could do an all Chicago just blend hybrid, then you got a team that really could make some noise. Watching those games in Japan and getting up early to watch them, you sensed in those games that the Cubs starting pitching was not sharp. And you're coming off spring training. I don't know why, But I think even watching Justin Steele twice now, there's just something off. And I'm sure he and the pitching staff are working on what it is that he's got to fine tune. But for as much as we're, grumbling about the bullpen, that starting pitching has had some struggles in the first 6 games, and that sets your tone. That's where that offense can explode and make up for some deficiencies on your pitching staff. I agree with you on Pete Crow Armstrong. All we've heard about is, he's so fast, he's so speedy, but he's got to be on base to steal bases, to score from, first on a double down the line. He's got to get on base. And it seems like his plate discipline is going to be so much better this year. And that's a big spark for that lineup. And you're right. I love watching Kyle Tucker hit home runs.
Yeah, get more of those home runs. I think it'll make me feel a lot better. Now, let's talk about your White Sox, Julie. You got to be a little bit encouraged. I mean, they lost a tough series. They probably could have won a couple of those games, against the Angels, but you got to be feeling encouraged, right? I mean, Sean Burke, had a nice showing in the opener. The pitching staff has been okay, but what do you think? Are you encouraged by what you've seen so far with the White Sox?
I'm really encouraged. I'm frustrated when I see on social media people who say, they lost 2 in a row, same old White Sox. It's like, no, not same old White Sox. This is not the team that set the record for losses last year. This is a team that actually has some decent pitching to hopefully set the tone. And as you mentioned, LaKeena, they were in the games they lost. Those weren't blowouts. And when they won that home opener, and every Sox fan was just going nuts, like, hey, whole new year, whole new team. It was electric. People I know who were at the ballpark that day were saying there was such a buzz. It was so vibrant. And, you kind of wanted them to carry that into the weekend. But as you mentioned, you're starting pitching. I mean, Sean Burke, when I heard Sean Burke was the opening day starter, I said, why? Well, he showed us why. He was really good. And their starters have struggled a little bit in that first inning, but not allowed damage, which I think is key. And when they're young, they are going to feel that, oh, shoot, it's the first inning and I'm walking guys or putting guys on base. But I think between Ethan Katz and Brian Bannister, who I'm just loving as part of this staff, I think they're working with these young guys to say, hey, you're going to get knocked around a little bit, but, stay with what's good for you, what's working for you. Jonathan Cannon had a terrible spring training. He was pretty good on Saturday. Davis Martin yesterday was lights out after a little bit of a rocky first inning. So I'm really encouraged about the starting pitching. I'm optimistic, maybe cautiously optimistic about the relievers. That lineup is just frustrating. And that's where I say, boy, if you had the Cubs hitters with the Sox pitching, the Sox could not get hits yesterday in the late innings when they had men in scoring position. And I love Andrew Vaughn as a human being, but boy, he had I know he did have a hit late in the game, but there were some situations he came up where I thought, you are the catalyst right now. There's guys on base. You got to push a run across. And I really was so optimistic after the I don't even want to call it a rain delay. It was like the tornado delay. When they finally resumed play, I thought, they're getting guys on base. They're going to break through here. And as soon as the Angels went up 3-2, and you just saw the Sox didn't have that threat, didn't have that scary guy in the lineup coming up, you just sort of felt this feeling in your gut, like, we're going to go home disappointed. But I'll take 3-2 losses versus getting blown out. It's going to turn. They're going to get some big hits when they need them, some more timely hits. And hopefully they're not setting any ugly records again this year.
I don't think that'll be too much of a case. Before I get to the next question about the Sox, I just have to say this. Shout out to the Section 108. Shout out to the Chicago Sports Bums. They had their tailgate on Thursday. I was there. I went to the first 2 games of that series. And you mentioned about opening day. It was an electric crowd. They were really looking forward to turning the page and moving on. Even though technically it wasn't a sellout, still 31,000 fans showed up strong to that ballpark. I was really proud for Sox fans on Thursday. I want to ask you about Will Venable. And I told people this on Thursday, whoever wanted to listen, that anything that's opposite and better than Pedro Grifol, I'll take it. What are your thoughts about Will Venable thus far? And did you check out that video following that Thursday win?
The one where he's in the cart, the laundry cart?
Mm.
That video?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely loved it. I loved the little speech he made in the locker room right before he said, like, you want me to get in there? there is an energy to him. There is an optimism. And to me, the biggest thing is let's see how he handles the pitching staff, because I feel like that was one of Grifal's weaknesses. Pedro Grifal also had so many games where they weren't ready to play out of the gate, like the first inning, and they weren't ready, whether it was mentally or preparation wise. And so I'm confident in Will Venable that maybe he's just bringing a different energy, a different tone to the clubhouse that they needed. And yeah, I thought, like I said, his little rah-rah speech after they won the opener, and then the beer shower in the laundry cart. He seems like, the type where the guys are going to be chanting, one of us, because he does seem like you look at him and he looks like he could still be playing. He looks like he blends in very, very well. So I'm excited to see what he does, when he gets in some high pressure situations, see what kind of pinch hitting choices, bullpen choices he makes. And I'm going to pile on with you. Shout out to the 108 guys, the Chicago Sports Bums. They're amazing. I love those guys. The 108ers are such a blast. And I saw them at it was around the Sox Fest. They had the night where it was like a bar night, and they did a little panel. And even back then, like Sox fans and 108ers, you could feel that everyone's like, okay, let's just start the season already. It wasn't an exciting off season. It wasn't. There weren't big blasts, big moves, oh my gosh, they went out and signed this guy. But Sox fans were still excited because everyone kept thinking it can't be as bad as last year. And I will say that 31,000, they seemed loud, they seemed feisty, and it was crummy weather. The White Sox have bad, cold, rainy weather for openers like every year. So give people credit for turning out and for making a good opening day splash for a team that really alienated a lot of its fans at the end of last year.
Well, another team that alienated have alienated fans taking with the ownership, especially are the Bulls. And the Bulls, they've been playing very well lately. Josh Giddey, has looked great. Kobe White certainly has looked great. Do you think the Bulls can get to the number 8 seed in the East?
I do, and I know it's kind of contrarian to say. I don't want to root for them to tank. I hate that in any sport with any team. I hate rooting for a team to tank, especially because drafting can be such a crapshoot, especially when you're not assured of the number 1 pick. If you knew, hey, if we lose that, if it's football, if it's the NFL, we lose, we're going to get the number 1 pick and take X quarterback. All right. I still don't love it, but in games of chance where there's ping pong balls and whatever, deciding, or even with the White Sox being so bad last year and not getting the number 1 pick this year because of stupid rules and technicalities, I don't want to root for a team to lose. And with this Bulls team being in every game and pulling off some big wins, I mean, you beat the Lakers twice with the Lakers full strength, with them being healthy. You beat them twice. And I think there is something to build on. I think you're absolutely right, LaKeena. When you look at guys like Josh Giddey and Kobe White, you're thinking, okay, they have some building blocks here. This is something to work with. And I think it's easy to get caught up in that excitement. And I love Billy Donovan. I think as long as we're talking about coaches and managers in this town, I think what he's brought to the Bulls has been fun to watch. So I hope they keep winning. I do think they can make the number 8 spot. And this tankathon talk in any sport, it's just not my cup of tea.
Well, the Bulls tried with Zion Williamson came out and that failed. That's why one of the reasons why Gar Pax is no longer here. And they tried again a few years before that. They left up with Derrick Rose, thank goodness, but they weren't. Outside of that, when it's time for them to tank, they cannot do it right. I want to ask you about Matas Buzelis. Of course, after that trade with Zach LaVine, and his confidence seems to have grown over the last month or so with extra playing time. Give us your thoughts about the Bulls rookie.
Did we lose her?
Okay.
I think the wife.
I think we lost her. Hopefully we can get her back soon. LaKeena, we talked about this Bulls team changing their style, playing with pace. Of course, after the trade with Zach LaVine back in June. Back in late January, early February at the trade deadline. Matas Buzelis, especially Dalen Terry, and Julian Phillips. They got more playing times, but Montez Buzel's confidence, I really like. He had it already at the start of the year, but with him getting more playing time, his confidence seemed to really match his play, and is really making a difference with this Bulls team.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way Buzelis is playing. He doesn't seem to be afraid. Taking on some of the, some of the, he kind of went at LeBron a couple of times, and Luka. We saw that dunk he had on Luka last week. So he doesn't seem he doesn't seem hey, I mean, he seems like ready to go, and look, he's not afraid. I think I feel like he's very raw, so I think he's definitely gonna have to work on some things in the offseason. Like he's only 19 still, so he'll be able to to improve it if he has good guidance and good mentoring and coaching. Maybe he and Kobe can work out together during the off season or anything like that, or if they bring in a veteran to come in to kind of help him out a bit. So yeah, I like what I'm seeing with the Buzelis. I mean, like I said, he's not afraid. He's look, this is a guy who grew up a Bulls fan, so yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely been impressing me. Just like I said, just look, he's only 19, so I think he'll do the little things a lot better.
Yeah, like you said, with that confidence, it brings a whole lot of energy to the lineup and to the court. And like you said, he's playing fearless. And once he really starts to study his craft and perfect certain things, I think eventually he's going to be good. Will he be a superstar? I think they still a long ways away. But you really like how he's starting out right now. We talked about Kobe White having injuries throughout the season, but over the last month or so, I really like his way he stepped up, and he's another, even though Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, he's taking the ball back to the basket. Remember, I told you I expected him to do that this year. We all know that he's a very good shooter, and he can score with the best of them in the game. But when your shots are not falling, take it to the basket. And he's been very aggressive in doing it over this last month.
Yeah, he really has. And like I said, he's won 2 straight. I don't know if he's going to win 3 straight Eastern Conference Player of the Week honors, but look, I think he's been playing. Look, I think he's been shooting the ball both inside and outside. He's been a facilitator. He knows that that's just his job now. So yeah, I think if they're gonna have to pay him, I think they still got 1 year left on that contract. So they may have to. They're gonna have to pay him, probably pay up a little bit. So yeah, I think AK's got some interesting decisions to make.
Yeah, let's bring back our guest, Miss Julie Swieca Gannon, and we were talking about the Chicago Bulls. And my next question,
I'm so
to you,
sorry,
Julie,
I lost you there.
No, it's okay. It happens. It happens.
Yeah, that's what we're discussing. And that's what we're discussing the Chicago Bulls. And my next question is to you. Me and LaKeena were talking about before you came back on with us. Montez Buzelis, their rookie. I really like his confidence. You can sense it from the day he was selected. Of course, he didn't get the playing time as we all would have liked because of Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. Now both those guys are gone. You start to see him get more playing time. His play is matching his confidence. Talk to us about the new Bulls rookie.
Spot on, Sid. I agree with you that his confidence is such a big part of why he's become more involved, more integral, more of a contributor. I think it started with being a participant in the All-Star festivities. I think you go back to that and you said, like, okay, this guy's realizing, I belong here. I'm in the NBA for a reason. And I think it has been really cool to watch the confidence of him grow, but also of his teammates, that they just seem to be gelling really well. And I know it's often overrated in sports, the clubhouse mentality, locker room vibe, but you do get the feeling they're young and fun and kind of like, let's just go show people that we belong here. And I go back to that Josh Giddey half-court shot last week, and the way his teammates were celebrating with him. It wasn't just, hey, we won a game and that was a really cool shot. They were lifting each other up and they're excited to see each other do well. And I think when you see that translates really well, that chemistry into building a culture with the Bulls that will hopefully get them back into being a playoff contender every year.
Well, speaking of playoff contenders, and I'm sure a lot of Bears fans will love to are hoping that all these moves that have been made so far in the off season will lead to perhaps a playoff spot. So, what do you think of all the moves that the Bears have made so far? Bringing on Tunney and bringing in Jenkins. Bringing guys that for some of them. That Ben Johnson knows. What do you think about the moves, and what do you think happens in the draft coming up in about a month? Just under a month from now, do they stick with what they're doing? They try to add more depth? Do they trade down? What do you think?
I love the moves, and here's why. They identified if they're going anywhere, if they're going to be a contender for a Super Bowl year in and year out, it's on the back of Caleb Williams. And to help Caleb Williams be productive, you need to protect him. And all Bears fans were groaning, not just last year, but the last few years, that this offensive line was just brutal. And you're getting your quarterbacks killed and you can't run the ball. You needed to improve in the trenches. It's not a sexy place to draft. I can remember covering the Mark Colombo draft and being like, we drafted an offensive lineman. Woohoo. It's not exciting. It doesn't, light up fans' interest to say you drafted a big horse of an offensive lineman. But if you go out and do it in free agency and trades, if you go out and improve in the offseason, which they've been doing, then it gives you the freedom and the flexibility with the draft. Go best player available and go for a playmaker, go for a splashy guy, go for a wide receiver, go for a running back. You took that component that you really needed to fix and addressed it long before the draft. So if you want to add linemen on either side of the ball as the draft goes on, that's great. But that first round pick is going to be valuable for somebody who's going to contribute and connect with Caleb Williams. I think people are hoping it's going to be one of the top wide receivers. But the fact that they made those moves that you're talking about in the offseason, I loved it. I thought they identified needs. They took care of it. It was like every day you were getting alerts on your phone. The Bears have signed so-so. And you'd say, again, another one? There were like 3 in 3 days. And so you felt like the team was not only making a splash, but being smart, identifying what they needed to get done. And if I'm Caleb Williams, I cannot wait to go to training camp and just seeing what I can do with this new coaching staff and with Ben Johnson at the helm and with some beef on the line to help hold them up.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Julie, with that 10th pick for the Bears, I think trading that pick is an option, but as of right now, I don't think that Ryan Post is going to do that. But if you were sitting in his seat, who would you select with that number 10 pick? I know people talk about defensive tackle Mason Graham, I believe out of Michigan. If he slides down that far, I don't think he's going to slide down that far. Offensive tackle Will Campbell, and of course you got running back Ashton Genty. I would understand if they made that selection at 10, but you don't draft a running back that high, especially in today's NFL. I don't think he's going to go past the Raiders, in my personal opinion. But if you were Jim Ryan Post, who would you select at number 10?
I wish I had my list of wide receivers in front of me, but I'm all in on wide receivers. I want a splashy playmaker who is going to extend the field and give Caleb Williams a good target. I think you're right. You can find steals at running back in later rounds. You can have the flexibility and the luxury of getting some of those linemen in later rounds. But I think you got to go best offensive playmaker available in the draft. And I have confidence in this staff to put something together based on what they've been doing, the way they can wheel and deal and stockpile draft picks and make some moves that give them that flexibility, those luxuries. So I'm going to go wide receiver all the way, best guy available. And you never know on draft day. Sometimes people drop for weird reasons or, teams surprise you with what's on their board. So I'm kind of hoping that we're all going to be celebrating and drinking the orange and blue Kool-Aid on draft day and hopefully well into the season.
Well, I think he's not a wide receiver, but Ty Warren from Penn State is a tight end. I know that there are some Bears fans that might want they may want him to take him at number 9, but I don't know if he's gonna be up there. But we'll see what happens there. Talking to our girl, Chicago sports media veteran, former Legend, I think, as said, say, and I agree, Julie Swieca Gannon. Sports on Sports LaKeena, McGee, Sidney Brown, with you now. The defense is going to be interesting because of course, do they get another edge rusher? To add more depth? Do you perhaps maybe get a corner? I know, Johnson. I know, that's going to be interesting to see what happens. And when he comes back, Brisker as well. What about the defense? So, what do you think the biggest needs for them, for the Bears, are on that side of the ball?
I agree with you. I'd like to see an edge rusher. I'd like to see somebody to shore up, the defensive line a little bit. With the cornerbacks and the DBs, it's partly about health. It's about getting these guys back healthy because they had guys they liked. You can kind of tweak a little bit there. It never hurts to add cornerbacks and safeties. But I feel like getting Johnson healthy and getting some of these guys back in the fold 100%. I don't know that that's as high a need as maybe a linebacker or an edge rusher to help put pressure on the opposing team's quarterbacks, especially when you look at some of the guys you're going up against in the division. I thought it was kind of intriguing that there was so much Khalil Mack talk in the off season, because a lot of people loved when he was here. And so I was kind of intrigued that, that was at least popping up in the rumor mill. I think those are the type of players they need to look at, to be explosive, to put pressure on the other team. And, you put pressure on the quarterback, he freaks out a little bit. He throws an errant pass downfield, and that's where those talented DBs come in and make plays.
Last time we had you on, Joey, sticking with the Bears. The last time we had you on, they were 3-2. We thought they were going to head to the playoffs, but a lot of change happened. Of course, Matt Eberflus gone, Ben Johnson in. But I want to get your thoughts about the passing of Virginia McCaskey. Of course, how ironic the last game that they played before she passed was beating the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau on the last day of the regular season. Do you have any Did you have any personal interactions with Miss McCaskey? And if so, what was that experience like?
Way back in the day when I was at Hallis Hall, I occasionally encountered her in hallways, and she was just everything she came off as on TV. She was gracious and lovely and genteel, but she was also, she was can I say badass? But she knew football, and she didn't like when the coaches were bad. When she wanted a coach fired, she wanted a coach fired. And so, I mean, it's just, she was delightful is I think a good word for it. I wish I'd known her better. I wish I'd had more conversations with her, but I know some of her kids, I've had more conversations with them, and I think they want to carry on her legacy. I think it's important to take what she brought to this team as, not just a matriarch of the Bears, but matriarch of the NFL. I mean, she's carried on her family's legacy, and I think it's important to George McCaskey and the rest of the family to keep her spirit alive in that sense. What I really loved in hearing some of the tributes to her, you heard guys like Jared Payton that consider her family, people that are part of the Bears fabric and talk about just getting to know her and just what a special lady she was. I know people who worked in the office who encountered her on a daily basis and just how gracious and kind she was. The other thing I'm going to tangent for a little bit is it was really sad when you're seeing people commenting on Virginia McCaskey. One of them was Mike Ditka, who is apparently not in great health. And you just felt as a lifelong Bears fan, like the names you grew up hearing, they're getting to the end of the road. And I was so brokenhearted because I know Mike's not been in great health. But seeing him commenting on Virginia McCaskey and what she meant to his career, that brought me to tears because of that connection, that legacy, and knowing that, one day we're going to be eulogizing the greatest coach any of us have seen in our lifetime with the Bears. And like I said, I don't want to get morbid and bring everything down, but I know he's not been in great health. I keep him and Mongo in my prayers all the time. And it just reminds you that, we're fans, but we consider our sports teams family, and we identify with a lot of these people. So heartbroken for Virginia's family, and hoping we don't have any more sad news on the Bears front for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And switch gears here on the college ranks for a second, Julie. I know you're a Northwestern grad, and there were the rumors about perhaps maybe Chris Collins might be leaving to go to Villanova. Now it looks like they're working on a contract extension to give him the resources that he needs to they didn't have a great season. I mean, they hung in there for a little bit, but injuries kind of got the best of them in the end. So, what do you think the next steps are for the men's hoops program?
Well, I jinxed them clearly because I was at a game right after Christmas, like 2 or 3 days after Christmas, and they were clicking on all cylinders and they were healthy, and they were signing posters after the game. The players were signing team posters. And when Brooks Barnhizer and Nick Martinelli signed my poster, I said, I'm going to frame this after you make the Final Four.
Oh, boy.
Oh. Any more Northwestern players. But at the time, they had the top 2 scorers in the Big Ten in Brooks Barnhizer and Nick Martinelli. And then Brooks was playing with a broken foot for 6 games. Talk about a warrior. But as they lost him and they lost Jalen Leach, who was one of their other top 3 scorers, I mean, you were just praying they'd put together a couple wins the rest of the way. And Nick Martinelli is a horse and should have won Big Ten Player of the Year. Should have been first all team, I should say. And it frustrated me because they had the potential, they had the tools, they had the skills. But in any sport, injuries are a part of it, and they didn't have the depth to overcome that. They did get some of their kids some playing time down the stretch, which I thought was great for next year. And they have a top 10 recruiting class coming in next year for the first time in school history. Chris Collins has what I last saw as the number 10 recruiting class in the country, features 4 real big studs. And one of them is Kendall Gill's son, who is supposed to, he chose Northwestern over Illinois, which had to kill Kendall. But they've got these kids coming in, and if any of them can contribute right away, that would be great. They need a big man. So I think you're going to see him in the transfer portal in the next few days with some of these big men. They have a 6'10" guard. His last name is Schweiger. He has it down to 3 teams, and Northwestern is the front runner. They're hoping he'll be in the fold in the next week or 2. And Chris Collins, when that Villanova rumor came out, LaKeena, my heart was in my throat. I'm texting every Northwestern fan I know, like, I'm gonna cry. This is terrible. Chris Collins is Northwestern basketball, and he should have a lifetime contract. I think the Villanova thing was leverage. I don't think he's that type of guy. Like Gary Barnett was saying, I'm going to go to Colorado. I'm going to go to Notre Dame. I don't think that's Chris Collins, but I think he knows if the team has to say, okay, what do we have to do to keep you here? He's going to use that. And what I'm hearing is that he's using it to take care of his coaching staff, to make sure they're well compensated, and that he's using it to fight for NIL money. And he apparently did that. Apparently the school said, all right, we'll give you the resources you need to put together the NIL packages to secure these transfer portal guys. That's what Chris Collins really wanted. Was there interest in Villanova? Maybe. But I think it was a leverage ploy, and I love Chris for it. And I hope it helps him get the funding he needs, the resources he needs. I think they're going to be a very respectable team in the Big Ten next year. I'm not going to tout any more Final Fours for a long time. Zip it, Jules. But I am confident that Chris Collins teaches them the right way to play the game. And these guys play hard, and they love him. Chris Collins bawled in the press conference when he had to announce that Brooks Barnhizer was done for the season. If I'm a recruit or a recruit's parent, I see that and I say, these guys are family. This is not just a business there. This is a culture. And there were some nail biter days, but I do think they will announce an extension very, very soon for Chris Collins.
Speaking of the men's Final Four, for the record, LaKeena can back me up on this. I did pick Florida to win the whole thing, but 2-part question here. I know it's not traditional, but I don't care. This is Second City Sports. 1, how did your brackets look? And number 2, is it Duke and nobody else, or do you think that Florida or perhaps Houston has a shot of winning the title?
I think the title's going to go to the Cooper Flags, those guys in blue. I did a bunch of different brackets, and in every one of them, I couldn't pick against Duke. And I looked at them like, wow, if they get knocked out early, I lost them in all my brackets. But I do think they're head and shoulders better than the rest of the group. I think it's an extremely boring tournament. It's so chalky. And when I was filling out my brackets, and Sid, maybe you did the same thing, you look at it and you start putting in your, this guy advances, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I have 4 number 1s in the Final Four. That can't be. So you go back and you start erasing and making changes. to put a 2 or 3 in the Final Four, even though originally your brain told you these 4 teams were the best and they were going to be there. But it's only happened once before, so it's not going to happen again. And that's why, people are putting Michigan State in the Final Four, Iowa State, or St. John's. You want to talk about some of those disappointments in the 2-3 area. I think Florida Duke will be a great championship game if that's how it shakes down. But I'm just disappointed that there wasn't more drama in the entire tournament. Early on in the first round or two, I said, how are they going to do one shining moment? There have been no buzzer beaters. Like, there were no exciting finishes. Maybe one with one of the play-in teams, but there was just nothing to be excited about. There's no Cinderella teams in like the Sweet 16 this year. I don't think there's anyone below a 10. And you want to be able to root for those little guys. They're not going to win the championship, but you want to see them get there. It's that excitement that had us buzzing about Loyola a couple of years ago when Loyola made their deep run. Yeah, they might not match up with the, top ranked teams in their brackets, but you were excited because you had somebody to root for that was different. I'm sure there are a lot of people groaning like Duke again. That program's steeped in history. They've done things, to be a perennial contender. And I do like John Shire a lot. I do think he's been fun to watch. Our local guy taking over for Krzyzewski and making that team extremely relevant, or continuing to make the team relevant. But I think it's going to be Duke all the way. I think Cooper Flagg is just lights out. He hits crazy shots. He shoots from a lot of places and hits them. So, and I think it was, what was the game I was watching? Maybe it was in the Big Ten tournament. One of the Northwestern guys hit a shot like out of bounds from behind the basket. Like, it went in. It was a 3-pointer, but he's like in the corner falling out of bounds. And I thought, that's what people want to see in March. I really hope that there's something in this championship game that makes it a one shining moment montage. But yeah, I think all the chalk in it has made it a little bit less exciting than I would like.
I think you answered my next question about the Cinderella teams, but I want to get this thought out about Duke first. I'm not a Duke fan. Shout out to them that I paid attention to them in 1991. They knocked one of the top 2 greatest college basketball games I've ever seen when they knocked off UNLV in 91 in Indianapolis at the old Hoosier Dome. And I know that's what started off for them. But
Sid, are you old enough to have seen that game?
Yes, I was. Even though that was the year I turned 11 years old, I was technically 10 years old back then. So I remember that game. Larry Johnson, Grandmama, he had that tooth in his mouth. Anderson, Hunt, Greg Anthony was on the team. Stacey Augment, the plastic man. R.P. Dick for Stacey for giving that name. So yeah, I remember that team. Larry Johnson, as you remember, he was a man among boys back then. So it was him, a quote unquote grown ass man against everybody else. But yeah, that UNFL team, even though they beat Duke the year before, everybody thought, just like I did, they were gonna roll their run it back. But Duke got them. That was the best college basketball game I've ever seen, of course, followed by Arizona and Illinois at the old Rosemont Horizon back in 2005.
Yes.
And so that was the top 2 college basketball games I've ever seen. We're heading down the whole search with Julie Swieca Gannon right here on Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. Sid the Kid here with you. Hopefully LaKeena will rejoin us coming up in just a moment. Julie, getting back to the tournament, I'm with you. I know some people, especially on both our radio stations here in Chicago, complained about, well, it's not enough buzzer beers. You only get a couple of those every year, even though most of the time the bigger teams win, like your Dukes and North Carolinas, and you throw a Michigan State in there like they did back in 2000. I like those Cinderella teams every once in a while. Of course, Loyola was big because they were coming out of Chicago back in 2018. I like the George Mason story back in those days. You need to shake things up every once in a while. You can't just have the same thing all the time. I'm a traditionalist in a lot of things, but every once in a while, you need to shake things up.
Exactly. And there's teams that aren't even considered Cinderella teams that I thought would be fun to see make some noise this year. I had Gonzaga going pretty deep in one of my pools, and that didn't materialize. But there are those teams that you thought, they might shake things a little bit. And then as you watch the first couple rounds develop, like I said, that Sweet 16, as it was unfolding, I just couldn't get past the ho-hum. Like there wasn't, like you said, that Cinderella team that you want to root for. I will say I was extremely proud of the Big Ten those first 2 days. There was so much SEC hype going into the tournament, and their freaking 14 teams that they got in. Well, the Big Ten the first couple days was 10-0. And I thought, okay, let's show these SEC people that the Big Ten's, someone to be reckoned with. I was rooting really hard for Michigan the other day. Purdue got pretty deep. Like, they had guys that were there down the stretch, and of course Tom Izzo. But I really liked that the Big Ten wasn't expected to be a powerhouse in this tournament, even for as many bids as they got. And they did hold their own pretty well for a while there. So, once Michigan State got knocked out, that was it for the Big Ten. The Illini are so hit or miss. They can have a game where they look like they're going to run to the championship, and then they can have a game where it's like, how did you even get in this tournament? So I know Illinois fans are frustrated with that. I know Brad Underwood has to hate that. And I feel like they've lost a couple guys to the transfer portal the last few days. So kind of seeing how they'll bounce back is sort of intriguing. Because they're perennially a team that makes the tournament, and somebody that, our state can root for. But I feel like, maybe there'll be some winds of change, just shifting and blowing a little bit in the Big Ten in upcoming years. As long as Tom Izzo's coaching, you can't bet against Michigan State. And it doesn't sound like he's retiring anytime soon. He's one of the deans of college basketball. Curious what you thought about that, Sid, as you're watching the tournament, that you're seeing like the Patinos and the Caliparis and a lot of these, like, the dons of college basketball in these games as you're getting into the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight. I loved it. For as much as I'm saying I wanted the Cinderella teams, I love when you see those coaches prowling the sidelines, and they've just got like so much of a resume and credentials. And, I thought that was really cool. And then you're also watching which coaches are like the new hip young coach. My husband is a Drake alum, so we've been following Drake over the course of the year. And we were talking about how the Drake coach left in a huff and took his son with him, blah, blah. And then Drake makes the tournament. And now Drake's coach is on the move. It's, you feel bad for these kids. It's not a professional team. This is still college sports. And they were recruited by these coaches that are jumping around. I can honestly say I have a real distaste for the Maryland coach. He seems like a real sourpuss, complaining about not getting the resources and then up and leaves. And, there's the coaching to me was probably more intriguing or more alluring than some of the games in the player matchups.
LaKeena. Yeah, go ahead, LaKeena.
No. Go ahead. Sorry, my little disappearing act.
Answering Julie's question about the coaching, LaKeena knows this, that I cannot stand John Calipari. I know ESPN did a 30-30 for him years ago. I know that he's slimy. I know he's not.
Oh, these guys are slimy. I agree.
Yeah, he's not the only one, but he's as the kids would say, he says it with his chest. I do appreciate his honesty, but it's just something about it that I don't like. In my personal opinion, he paid his own money to get into the Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame. Okay, congratulations, you do whatever you only have all that money. But outside, take recruiting out of it. What is he really known for? Talking about Calipari, really, what is he really known for?
Cheating. Oh.
I digress. I digress from Calipari, but getting back to the other coaches that you mentioned with Rick Pitino, as a kid can back me up on this. I had St. John's not going to the Final Four. I had them losing to Florida in the Elite Eight, of course, to get bounced by John Calipari of all people in that second round. R.J. Louise got sat down for the last 5 minutes. I know it was a controversial move, but that's Rick Pitino for you folks. I know some folks don't do their homework, but he does things like this. But Tom Izzo, as you mentioned, I got great respect for him. That job should be his for life. Of course, when you mentioned about Coach K and Roy Williams, and of course Nick Saban in college football bouncing out because, as LaKeena said, this is a new era of college football in 2025. It's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that the names you mentioned there, that they're guys that are legends in their sports. I was even thinking as we were talking about it, just some of the other young coaches that you're starting to see move into that echelon. And I was thinking Matt Painter is a guy who's there year in and year out. Mm-hmm. And, he doesn't have the longevity of a Tom Izzo yet. He certainly doesn't look as weathered as some of these coaches. What is happening to Rick Pitino's face? But I think it's interesting to see who's developing into that next group. And I feel like Coach Few at Gonzaga, he's already kind of working his way in there. But you're starting to see, these guys aren't going to coach forever, although Tom Izzo sounds like he's going to. But yeah, when those guys, I was thinking about Bill Self, how long he's been around. I mean, they said something the other day. I think it's been 20 years since he was at Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, God, has it really been that long? These are guys that you've seen. You mentioned Roy Williams. These are guys who are associated with college basketball, just upper echelon, consistently. And I think what's interesting is you were talking about recruiting, quote unquote, and so much of the recruiting with some of these, Pitino, Calipari, slimeball kind of guys, was money under the table. You knew guys were getting perks and stuff from boosters and whatever. And now that there's NIL, it's kind of leveled the playing field a little bit. You're still going to have, your big boosters in the South still throwing cars and houses and things at players and their families. But I think it is interesting to see how it's made other teams more competitive in recruiting. I was against paying the players for a long time, but then I kind of started to see the light. Some of the Northwestern football players had actually, they kind of started like not a rally, but they were campaigning to have players compensated because the NCAA, whether it was football or basketball, is capitalizing on these guys' licensing and their names and faces to make money. And these guys were saying, well, we can barely pay for food, after our workouts or whatever. So I think it's been kind of interesting how it's changed my looking at things. Like I said, I always thought, you're already getting a scholarship. Like, why do we have to pay you to play sports? But the fact that it is $1 billion business and somebody's making money off it, it makes more sense to include the players in that. And like I said, I'm really intrigued by the transfer portal and the NIL money and just how it's forced schools to rethink how they go about developing a program. I think it's really cool.
Well, if you think about because there was this discussion, all over social media this weekend about, they're not any Cinderellas, blah, blah, blah. Someone even said, well, could, the NIL, this, all this, could that probably make it harder for those smaller schools to come in and perhaps maybe make a big run? I mean, look at St. Francis from the Northeastern Conference. They got to go all the way down to D3 just because they can't compete. And you guys mentioned some of the the older coaches. One of the reasons why your Jay Rice, the Roy Williams, the John Boeheim is retired. Jim Boeheim, I should say, retired. I mean, it was because they didn't want to deal with that. Roy Williams too, but Tom Izzo, to his credit, he doesn't like it, but he's adapting to it. Mark Few, same thing. I mean, he's too crazy about it, but he's adapting. But you got all these young coaches, your John Shires, Todd Golden down there in Florida. Look, Kelvin Sampson, he's adapted to it. So
yes.
It's one of those things where you're just like, either you adapt to it or you adjust to it or you just don't and you just retire. What do you think, Julie?
Yeah, you mentioned Kelvin Sampson. I'm sorry we haven't mentioned him yet because he's a guy who's been around forever and is very well respected, but I felt like wasn't getting enough respect going into the tournament. That people didn't give him enough credit for the job he's done with his team and how far they've been able to go. But it is interesting when you talk about guys like Roy Williams who say, I've had enough of this. I am out. Sometimes they want to spend more time with their grandkids or they just don't want to travel anymore. They don't like, as you said, the way the game is changing. And then you get guys like Tom Izzo who has no interest in retiring, who's very outspoken about I'm going to do this till I drop dead. And I think for a long time, Mike Krzyzewski was the same way. And I think, sometimes health issues take guys out of the arena. Like I said, family issues, but there are guys who are lifers and, they're synonymous with their sport and their program. And, Sid, you had mentioned, which was Nick Saban. And I was thinking about how many Big Ten guys I followed when I first started going to Northwestern. And I mean, you had guys in football and in basketball, like Judd Heathcote, who was on the sidelines forever. Hayden Fry in Iowa football. These guys were just institutions. They were like statues on the sideline. They were there. They were respected and regarded and feared. And I think that's part of why some of the coaching carousel is sort of distasteful, is because we like our guys to stay at a university, to stay at an institution, especially because they're telling these kids, come and play for me because I'm going to be here. And then when they leave, you're kind of letting all these kids down. And I guess that's where the transfer portal makes it easy for these guys to hop and follow a coach. But I do think when you have those guys who are at a school for decades, obviously they're doing something right, because if they had bad seasons, they would have been fired. So they're consistent winners. They're consistently favorites of the fans and the boosters and the players. And those are the guys that you associate with college sports. Like I said, that's why you go back to the Cinderellas, you kind of look for who are those guys you can root for that maybe you don't know as much about, the Ben McCollum kind of guys. LaKeena mentioned, the Cinderellas not standing a chance or not being able to compete with some of these, high recruits at the bigger levels. I would say I agree with you for the most part, but that's the fun of the tournament, is you get a day when you're not hitting free throws, or you get a day where, it's just bouncing off the rim funny, or maybe a guy twists an ankle in the first half and he's out. I think that's why we love the tournament so much, are those twists and those, oh, I didn't see that coming. I've decided next year for my brackets, I'm going to start studying free throw percentage a lot more, because I've seen games where it's just been like clunk after clunk after clunk. And that should be a gimme. That should be a freebie. That should be easy. It's like walks in baseball. You need to take advantage of those situations. And sometimes a team just doesn't have it. They're just not hitting their shots. I think it was Texas Tech who had played Drake and hit all these 3-pointers. I mean, just like crushed them or maybe they had back-to-back games. One in which they were hitting threes like crazy. And the next game, they were pounding it inside in the post. And so if you were preparing, if you're the coach that's scouting, that's going to play them next and say like, oh, we got to guard the perimeter. And all of a sudden they adapt and they say, nope, we're going to hit layups and jams and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the fun of it. When you see that, how do you adjust? How do you prepare for it? Which team came to play that day? I love that part of it. I love seeing that, a crazy bounce, the ball that gets stuck behind the basket kind of shot, when it gets stuck in the behind the hoop. I love that that's what the tournament is. And you do have those guys who can pull off an upset. They might not run deep in the tournament, but you do have those Cinderellas that just everything's clicking that day. Every shot's falling. And, you get excited to see those teams, those highlights, and hopefully they make a one shining moment montage, which, by the way, is one of my favorite things in all of sports. The music starts and I start crying.
And the late great and the late great Luther Vandross brings it home every time. I'll say that with 2 thumbs up. Last moment or two with Julie Swieca as we wrap up the program right here on Second City Sports on the Monday Extravaganza. Sid, LaKeena here with you. Julie, going back to baseball, I know we're hopefully LaKeena comes out too. Maybe you could persuade her one more time. Hopefully we see you at a future Chicago Sports Bum / Section 108 tailgate later on this summer. The next one's on May 24th against the Texas Rangers at 3 o'clock. Of course, 3 hours before then the tailgate starts. But outside of the tailgate and maybe some of the prospects that we should see this year, like Kyle Teal and Costa Montgomery, what else are you looking forward to in this White Sox season? And I will say this for me personally. I don't know if you checked out the promotional schedule. Of course, they handed out these 1906 jerseys on Saturday. I'm wearing it right now. So I don't know if you checked out the promotional schedule. If you have, what promotional items are you looking forward to? I know they got a bunch of bobbleheads. I know they got a post-game concert later on this year. What other promotional schedules or anything else, food items that you're looking forward to attending this Sox game or two this year?
Well, I mean, because our marketing team does such a good job highlighting things that are not team related, because they don't want you to focus on, look how many games we lost last year. They want you to focus on, look at our new milkshake this year. I am intrigued by the cake milkshake. The campfire one was very good. I thought it was a little overhyped, but it's something you had to experience. I hear this one is even better. There's been food items that I'm like, oh, that's intriguing. Things with like brisket involved and stuff like that. There was something that Stoney and Triffin were eating on the broadcast the other day, and it was like cheese with some sort of fiery Cheetos on it. That was a hard.
I think it's like the Asian hot dog or something like that. Yeah, I saw that the other. Even though I was at the game, I caught it on replay. Yeah, I saw they were talking about that on the broadcast on Saturday. Yeah.
I'm out on that. But I do love, they have the best ballpark food. I've been to, I would say probably 15, 16 ballparks. And by far, the Sox always have the best ballpark food. So I will check out the concession stands for sure. I love the giveaways. I love that they're doing so much with the jerseys, especially with this being the team's 125th anniversary. I think that's really cool that they're capitalizing on that. The bobblehead that jumped out at me is the one with the 4 pitchers from their World Series team. I want that bobblehead so badly. I have goosebumps as I'm describing it right now. And I can't wait for Burley Statue Day. I love Mark Burley.
I'll be there for that one. I'm gonna be there for that one.
Yes, that's gonna be a hot ticket. And I mean, Burley is such a recluse. He wants nothing to do with the attention or the media or the hype. So he's got to come out for that. He has to. And I really think like that's something Sox fans will be able to relate to. It's the 20th anniversary of the World Series team. So it's a good way to incorporate that this year. Yeah, I honestly, I've said it before, no pressure, Mark Burley, but if he did an autograph signing with the proceeds going to his animal rescue charity, he would rake in tens of thousands of dollars, because that's the one player, if you ask Sox fans who collect autographs, memorabilia, that's the one guy, that's the holy grail, because he doesn't do signings. And so I would love somebody to whisper in his ear, like, hey, I know you don't like doing this kind of stuff, but he does a lot for charity for animal rescues down in St. Louis. I would love to see that happen. And I think Sox fans would love to just shake his hand and say, thank you for everything you gave to this club, because he's, to me, like, well, he's my favorite Sox player of all time, but just, he resonates with everybody. Nobody in Soxdom has a bad word to say about Mark Burley. So, so I can't wait for Burley Statue Day. And yeah, they've got a bunch of great promotions, but those are the ones that I definitely circled on the calendar. I did just put May 24th down on my notepad. So I got to make sure I get out there for some of those tailgates, because the Bums and the 108ers, great people. I was included in the 108 brackets this year for the first time. And I was just so, you know, I was happy to be nominated. I really was. I was excited to be included. And you get to meet so many cool people through stuff like that. You're following people on whatever social media platform. And, you know, there's just so many good Sox fans out there. And I'm so grateful anytime I get to meet them, meeting you guys at the tailgates. I love everything about Sox fan mentality. It's gritty. It's hard-nosed. It's not about like, oh, I'm going to go drink my foo-foo beer in the neighborhood. It's about like, hey, let's get to the tailgate and you know, hunker down. I love Sox fan mentality. And, you know, the whole like good guys wear black. And don't you love when you see people repping the Sox, even if it's just because they love the logo or the colors or whatever? I love when I see it.
It's like all that, the color, the logos, all that. Yes.
Yes, I saw somewhere recently that the Sox custom license plate outsells the Cubs custom license plate. And I thought, that's crazy. I can't believe that. But people said, oh, well, sometimes people like it because it's a black license plate and it goes with their car. All right, we'll take it. You know, if it makes me let you cut in front of me in traffic because I know you're a Sox fan, you got it. But it is, you know, everybody feels like their fan base is special for a reason. And I have always felt like the Sox fan base is special because of that, you know, kind of underdog mentality and scrappy and gritty. And, you know, I'll take that any day of the week. And I think Bears fans embrace that too. Bears fans love the hard nose, like black and blue division. And, you know, the guys talking about, I had a Polish sausage with my granddad and I was going to the games, and, you know, the typical like guys that they make fun of on Saturday Night Live and whatever. I love being a Chicago fan. I would not want to be a sports fan anywhere else. And you certainly would not catch me being a sports fan in Philly, because those people are mean.
Oh, goodness. Well, last question for me, Julie. Of course, you're your old employer, 6-7 the score. Of course, Dan Bernstein, you know, got the boot a couple of weeks ago. Now they're on the lookout for a new midday show. Who do you think should be part of the new midday show? Should it be Layla Rahimi and Marshall Harris, couple good friends, other good friends of the show? Our other buddy Mark Grody, we've been saying he should have a shot at a daily show. What do you think? Who do you think should replace Bernstein?
Well, Mitch Rosen hasn't called me yet, so I'm kind of insulted. No, I'm kidding, Mitch. I love Mitch Rosen. I think they will give Layla and Marshall the chance to develop their chemistry. They know each other from when she's filled in. And Marshall's under contract, although I know now he's doing stuff for Channel 7. So
yeah,
he's got a lot on his plate. I am proud of him that he's able to juggle all that. But I'll be curious if he'll wind up stepping away from radio because it's too much to handle. I don't think so, but it is a lot. I love the idea of Mark Grody having a full gig somewhere on the station, a daytime gig. I know he's got his nighttime show and he's excellent on the Bears beat. I love hearing his reports, but Grody is just so much fun to listen to. And he's that great combination of sports and life. Because, you can't talk sports 4 hours every day. You have to throw some little fun blurbs in there, or whatever. I think Bernstein was really good at that. I think, talking about, the steak rub he had or something, like it was fun to add a little bit of levity into sports talk. And I wish Dan all the best. Dan started at the Score after I did, so we overlapped on the Bears beat, the Bulls beat. I haven't talked to him, but I hope his health is okay. I hope he's getting the help he needs. He gave a lot to the station for a long time. I love what they've got in place. I think Lawrence Holmes and Matt Spiegel are dynamite in the afternoons. So they've got some young talent that's going to be there hopefully for a while. But I agree with you. I'd love to see Grody somehow shoehorned in there. Maybe they treat Grody like they did Layla for a while, and it's like Grody Wednesdays. When they would have Layla on Wednesdays with the midday show. Maybe they do Grody has or maybe Fridays if it's not a busy Bears day. Back when I was covering the Bears, there wasn't a lot going on Friday. I would go there to get the coach and find out if anyone's injured for the weekend games or whatever, but it was never a big media day. So if Grody wants to stay on the Bears beat, but maybe be part of a Friday rotation, I think that'd be cool. There's so many people that have come through Chicago radio that I just would love to see back here. Chris Ranji, I think, is great. I know he's got his gig in St. Louis, but if he ever wanted to come back, I hope the Score would find a spot for him. But yeah, I think for now, Layla and Marshall are still kind of working on their chemistry a little bit, still trying to find their niche, what's going to make their show stand out. But I think they're both great. Layla and I have met once or twice, and I support women in sports that are representing, that are legit. And like my girl LaKeena here, know their sports. Shout out to Brooke Fletcher, who's been doing the sideline reporting for the White Sox first few games. I think she's been great. And I'm really hard on sideline reporters. I don't want some little oh my God, I talked to this player and he's wearing blue eyeliner today. I don't, that does nothing for me. And I'm not saying anybody in town is like that. I'm just saying in general, when I see that in sports, I cringe. You saw, there's a lot of people in the tournament. Did you notice this? Sideline reporters are more prevalent on the court than ever. And it kind of gets under my skin a little bit when they're talking to a player coming on and off the court. Coaches, okay, they know the drill, but the players, they're 18, 19 years old. Let them go in the locker room and get situated. And there have been some really good interviewers in the college ranks this year, but I just think the job that Brooke's done so far with the White Sox, she's informative. She's no nonsense. She knows her stuff, which is important. And I think she and Connor McKnight, what they've done with the two of them in just those first few games already, I really like what CHSN is doing with their White Sox broadcast. And I'm going to throw out a compliment to Schriffen, who I think just the first few games has sounded much better this year. He sounds more relaxed. He sounds less forced, less, hey, I'm going to have this shtick. I think he's sounded really good the first few games, and he and Stone are starting to develop a chemistry. So some good things, some bright spots on the White Sox this year that, hopefully mean it's a fun season for everybody.
All right, this has been the great Julie Swieca Gannon, a Chicago sports radio personality, a legend, as LaKeena would say, and a culinary goddess. If you can, Julie, stick right there. We had to ask you a question off the air if you can, but on the air, we'd like to say thank you very much for joining us. Much continued success. We'll definitely get back into your culinary career the next time we have you on. I know we didn't get a chance to ask you a question this go around about your culinary projects, but we'll talk about that the next time we bring you on. So thank you for joining us once again.
Love you guys.
All right. LaKeena closes out.
You can follow McGee on the Twitter, X, and IG.
You can follow your Shirley Sidney Brown on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. SIDKID80. Julie, where can the lovely people follow you on the X machine?
They can find me at Julie Swieca, capital JULIE, capital SWIECA. My old account, which had like 1,000 followers, got hacked, and X has done nothing to help me fix it. I've been trying to get it fixed since the end of January. So make sure you're following me at the right one, at Julie Swieca, all one word, capital J, capital S. And I hope people will come follow me because I'm on there a lot with sports content, but also just all sorts of fun, like dog pictures and things. So come check me out.
All right. Sounds great. Be sure to download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms. Please subscribe to our podcast. We are located at War Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We are on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app, and WARR Media on all social media platforms. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from 12:15 to 2:15 p.m. Central Standard Time right here on Sports Zone Chicago. One more game, as the kids would say. Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from noon from 12:15 to 2:15 p.m. Central Standard Time right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
And of course, you can catch the replays of all the Sports Zone Chicago's great content from our show, Sean and Maya, the Smoke Fellas, What's Up Cuz, and so much other great content. You can catch it, the replays anytime, anywhere on the Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channels.
And we will provide.
And of course, for Sid and Julie, I'm LaKeena, the Second City Sports on Sports Chicago. Enjoy all the baseball. I think the Sox just scored another one. They're up 9-0 against Minnesota right now. Enjoy the baseball, the women's basketball, the NBA, and so much more. This is a great time of year, I guess, if you're a Chicago, any sports fan in general, especially a Chicago sports fan. So, stay warm, stay dry, stay safe, and we'll see you guys on Friday.
Go Sox! Holla!